You don't want to be there for judgment yet. You want to get your life in order before. Call on Jesus, salvation by faith through grace alone, and God's grace, that is, and Jesus Christ and his work alone. So what did he ever do for me? Well, let's see. He probably spent a couple thousand miles walking his feet all over the Middle East, then got tortured, butchered, stuck on a cross, died, stabbed through the heart after he died, stuck in a grave, big old tomb, for 3 days, as we call it. Then a 2-ton stone was heaved. No, not just rolled back, heaved. And he was gone. And when the women came, there was an angel there. Yeah. And Mary met Jesus. Called him Rabboni. 500 witnesses rose to heaven with many witnesses watching. It's the greatest historical, most recorded historical figure in human history. Undeniable. So, just saying. Anyway, I'm going to put the title on here, which is a little different. And that's my typical ending more than opening. But what I wanted to do is I was working on my trailer yesterday, and there were some things that just seemed to be a little bit appropriate. I wish I had some more stuff here to show you, but it's on the trailer. I got a surface mount light. It was the coolest darn thing in the planet, I thought. So I ordered it. It looked like I had a wire that came out the end. That's what I wanted. So I could just scooch it down the tube, hook up the wires, and be done. I could hide the wires behind the tube, so when I go through the woods, stuff wouldn't drag on it and peel them out. Didn't work. Turns out it's surface mount hole through the back, not just hole through the back and down. And it had to be an oval style hole. At least they wanted it. It's round on mine. Big old pad, screw here, and you had to make a hole here for the wire to go through. The light clipped with the wire sticking out the back. You know why the hole was oval? Because the jackasses didn't bring the wires out together. The wires are 3/4 of an inch apart. So you had to make a hole or slot big enough that the wires came through without bending and shorting and grounding, and it was a mess. I'm looking at this, but it didn't show you any of that when you're ordering it online. So, but you'd pay 2 to 3 times more if you go to your local Napa store, which I'll probably do next time. I was originally ordering lights for the rear, LEDs, nice wide ovals, but I didn't realize how wide the oval was. I mean, it was huge. So, but the biggest problem I had was I discovered something. They have these neat little heat shrink jobbies, right? And the bands tell you 16 to 14, and this one's 10 to 12, I believe. It's 16, 14, 12 to 10, I should say. These melt in the middle. The bands do shrink, not very well, but they do. And I used 4 of them and hooked my lights up. Well, I took a look at the old lights, red and black wires. Took a look at the new lights, red and black wires. Hooked the wires up the way they came off the old one. No! The red and black are reversed on the LED. Thank you very much, you morons. No, I don't remember the company that sold them, but whatever. And they say, well, you should have checked before. Just one of those things where red and black on this side were hooked in a particular way to the gray and the yellow wire, and on the other side, the green and the... No, it was the brown and yellow wire on one side, and the green and yellow wire, green and brown on the other. The brown is constant. The brown on trailers and most American manufacturing is the running lights, okay? No, it's not ground. What would be called a natural color in Europe that would be a ground circuit is not the same here in the U.S. trailer circuit. U.S. trailer market, if I remember correctly, let me try this again. The brown is your running lights. Yellow is your left light, turn signal, stop and turn. Green is stop and turn on the right, and white is your ground wire. So I'm hooking the lights up the way they came off. Oh no, it's a foreign light. Well, the one I put on was a foreign light too, but it was wired different. So I had to redo it. But in the meantime, I had the red version of this, which I dropped off the table, and I heat shrunk it, got the solder to work. In fact, I got the solder to work so well it started to ooze out. So everything was shrunk, tested. Oh crap, got it wrong. So I had to cut these out. And I said, well, let's find out. I said, this is a perfect time to find out how well these things seal. They don't. Okay? They were supposed to seal, as it said when I bought the things. Fortunately, the kit was pretty cheap. The only seal is the pressure on that plastic band because it's a little more rigid than the rest of it. How do I know? When I went to take them off, I clipped at the solder right through the middle or on either side of the solder, whatever. And then when I clipped it, I was able to take my little pliers, stick them on the wire, and push the plastic right off. Just, I could almost do it by hand. There was nothing that glued it to the wire, so there was no actual seal to it at all. Irony of ironies. I think I got most of these from McMaster Carr. These are crimp, and you're going to say they're not as good. Well, to me, they're generally not as good, but they're a lot easier to install in general. Now, I do have one of those little mini butane torches that uses the catalytic converter that sends out hot air, not flame. You know, you get the little flamethrower things. Yeah, well, I don't like using those. And I had one, an old school jobby, I think it was a Power Probe brand. And it put out the nice hot air. It's beautiful. It comes out so hot sometimes on small wires you can solder with it. You don't need the soldering tip. Yeah, it's that hot. But it works great for things such as this. Did an excellent job without burning these covers at all. In fact, the wire insulator will burn before you'll burn this. But you're not talking a heck of a lot of difference in temperature. But this is low temperature solder, and the heat shrink, of course, relatively low temperature. And in general, this works fine. But you're burning a lot of butane, you're taking a lot of extra time, you're making sure it's lined up. The solder sometimes on some of these, if you don't get the outside ends shrunk down before you start melting much of the solder, then the solder can actually run out and you'll have a ground problem out here because the solder will give a connection all the way back in. So there are some problems with these that you have to remember and think about. These things, crimp them, shrink them, you're done. And that's what I ended up using the second time. I cut these off, cut on either side of the solder, slid them right off because they weren't glued, put these things on there, and these are glued, and you can't hardly tell the difference internally. That's the funny thing. Well, let me get the big one here. You can see that it looks I know it's not great lighting, but you can see that it's pretty darn flexible. It's a little firm, but it gets more flexible after you operate the glue. Get it to stick to the wire. Then it still stays pretty darn firm because it was glue. But when you heat this up, you'll see a little seam bead around the end of it. You know the hot glue is on there and sealing. How do you tell the difference? Well, you're going to have trouble with any one of them no matter what you do. And the glue doesn't stick if you have a dirty old wire like half of my wires were here that I was working with. But still, it does help seal. How do you know that it worked? Well, if you have to do what I did, you have to cut more wire off of these guys and cut off each end of the metal contact in the middle. And then you try and peel these off. You'll find out that more than half the time they do not just peel off. You end up cutting the wire off down here because the glue works that well. These, I believe, if I remember correctly, I bought from McMaster Carr. These were Amazon. I don't recommend them at all. Don't even bother. That was a multiple kit that has it all the way down to, I think, 22. I think. Because the red ones, these are, what are they, 1820? Something like that. And sometimes you can get a nice little 16 slit in there. In fact, quite often you can. That's the weird part about it all. I'm sure these are blue or 1614, which would mean these are 1820. Well, they still work quite often for And a lot of wiring anymore is 18 gauge. Don't ask me why, but it is. Another one that I bought for a trailer, well, this is something I've had for quite a while. And it's odd, and I know people at JP Riley, oh, man, you got two size rings in here. Just pull it. You got one. Out in the field, it generally worked well, but they whine like little pansies. I want what I want. Little millennials. Some Gen Xers, but mostly millennials. Just, I want. No, that's what you get, kid. Shut up and go away. I understood why there was trouble with some of the other managers in the system that were before. But what a bunch of pansies. This thing also, on the other side, is heat, shrink, and seal. McMaster car as well. One of the other things I did with work on trailer is if most of the stuff on your average little home trailer is 1/8 inch steel. So these things are fantastic. Now this is the larger size, 3/8 hex on top instead of the 5/16, but I use 5/16 on mine. Buzzed right down through the hole, made it work perfect. Mounted it right there. What's the problem? Well, in my case, no problem, but you have to be conscious of the idea that from my fingernail down is often exposed that much. And you say, why? Well, you have to have enough to run through to form the threads to tighten it down. So you're talking 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch of this hanging out wherever these are used. However, they are slick. They bore their own right size hole. If you want to drill a hole before putting one of these in, be my guest. But for 1/8 inch steel, and as you can see there, you can go up to 3/16 and probably bore your hole and make it work. But you get to 1/4 inch, you'll snap these off. So keep it 1/8 inches, about the best that they're for. Just the long threads for the thickness of whatever material you're clamping down. The other one that you can do, and these were fairly easy to get, and I know, I got them at a local hardware store where they've got those little bins all over the place that you have to keep track of the package and write down what was there. And sometimes you leave the bins out so they can come over and tweak them with a little tweaky price gun. This is stainless steel. Why didn't you use that? Well, because I didn't need to. Now, another idea to use with both of these styles. This is a metal screw as well, but countersunk for the type of lights that I had. I'll tell you why in a minute. But I took their silicone brake grease, and that's what I put on these rather than Never Sees, because it's going to make a mess either way. How about a mess you can wipe off? Instead, you have to put your hand in parts washer to get it off, then clean your hands with a regular cleaning rag or hand cleaner, and then go in the house and wash that off. Just use this and wipe it off. That worked better for this. Now, why do I mention this? This is a countersunk screw for mine because I had a flat surface mounting bracket, and then the light snapped into the mounting bracket, countersink underneath to mount the bracket. The countersink that came in the kit were worthless. They weren't even worth wood screws. I had the perfect size hole, and they wouldn't start a thread. And I got them all the way in there, and one tightened up for a brief second. And then just as you got it, not even tight, just nice and firm because it's in plastic. Woo, worthless. And I pulled it out, and I literally pulled it out. Threads were gone. Smashed them. So the kit screws, throw them away. Now this kit, another kit that I had, actually had mounting bolts in it that I didn't need. That's why I went to these guys. Now these little countersinks were sheet metal or semi-self tappers. I had some of these Phillips drivers, and when I had the right size hole, buzzed right in there, beautiful as can be. Same thing, put the grease on them. And there we are. So the kit screws, any screws you get in the kit, 9 times out of 10, just pitch them. Now the bracket on my light was about 8 inches. That's about 8.5, but just to give you a perspective of how long the bracket was. But there were 2 large holes on the ends. Well, I could only get one of them to line up, and there were 2 in the middle. Well, the 2 in the middle, I just put the 2 screws in there, and because the brackets were bent up from running in woods, it folded it down and had nice pressure on the thing. The light fit. I was golden. And once I got the wiring done, which was even better yet, they have a tube down the side of the trailer. I pulled the wire out, and it had been hanging out. Well, they had nice long 6-inch leads on this thing. I didn't cut anything off. I hooked them, pulled the wire through the tube, and was able to bunch it up in the front. So if there's anything I need to repair, I have extras. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're working on your trailer wiring. Sorry about the light, but I forget once in a while. And just simple things that we don't think about or forget about, or like I did, you run into it trying to something new and finding out that it doesn't work. Fortunately for me, the whole kit with 100 useless or 150 useless little connectors in there only cost me about 10 or 20 bucks. So that was a good find. All right, time for me to get out of here. Catch you folks later.